Well, less than a month ago, my son-in-law and daughter and their family bought the place you see here. It's an 88-acre farm on Manitoulin Island, 30 acres cleared. The barn could use some work. We're talking about that, and you may see some more about that in the future, but the house is pretty new, and it's just a wonderful piece of land. And it's described in this local history book. Now, I never had any reason to pay attention to this piece of property and its entry in this book, but after they bought it, I paid close attention, and I found something very interesting. I won't read everything to you, but listen to this section. They first cleared the trees and sold firewood. That's referring to Lorne and Alma Baker. They're the first people to actually clear land and farm here, and that was in 1934 that they built the house, so pretty recently, really. Then they burned off the land, and the deep soil below the bluff would burn a long time. But afterwards, it proved to be excellent gardening soil, and you could almost see everything growing. They grew and processed huge amounts of vegetables, selling some whenever possible. So that got me curious. Where is this legendary patch of gardening soil? What does it look like? All we know for sure is that it's the bottom of a bluff. Well, there's a couple of places on the property that meet that description, but I have found something that I've never seen before in all my time. It's at the bottom of a bluff, it's near the house, and I think this is the legendary garden spot. But something that my son-in-law discovered really clinches it for me. So let's drive down, I'll show you the spot, and then I'll show you this interesting old finding too. So if this is the legendary garden spot, it hasn't been cultivated for at least 50 years. There's a lot of overgrowth here. I can't go any further because there's a log, so let's head out on foot. I think it might be that way. So I've noticed other areas on this property grow really well, better than I'm used to seeing around here, and not necessarily because it's gotten any care or fertilizer. So if you can see through the trees, that's a limestone bluff, not hugely tall, 20-something feet maybe, and the house is up top. And then we come to this clearing, which, by the way, you can't see on Google Earth too. That's how I first spotted it. But now, no doubt this area has grown in. There's some small stuff around here. If we're going to use it for a garden, we're going to have to bring it back to its former condition. But take a look at how tall these plants are. If nothing else, certainly is a fertile little piece of ground here. I mean, how tall is that? How tall are they? 7 feet maybe? I've seen plants like this before, but never ever this big. As you can see, if you look around, it's about the size of what you'd want for a big family garden. As I said, it's grown in some, but this is, I think, where it's at. And let's just take a look at the soil here. Scratch it a bit. It's fairly light, which is great for hoeing and things. So this sure looks like the spot to me. And we're going to try to grow something here. We're going to cut this stuff down, prune back some trees, and just see how it will grow. There's two challenges we're going to face though. One is deer. white-tailed deer. There are a lot of them around here. A lot more than there were 70, 80, 90 years ago when this was cultivated. People had to hunt deer a lot more. They hunted them out of season because it was either that or starvation up here in Manitoulin. So far more deer. We may have to set up an electric fence to deter them. And as my cameraman Robert would tell you if he could talk on this camera, there's a lot of mosquitoes down here too, which is to be expected. I think maybe they're going to clear off a bit when we get it trimmed off. But there's another thing I want to show you, and it's something that my son-in-law Paul discovered, and this for me clinches it as this being the spot for that little garden where you could almost see everything grow. So let me go and we'll find this little thing right now. So this is that limestone bluff. It's not terribly tall, but it does fit the description. The mystery garden is over there, and just down here is something you don't see very often. There it is. It's a hand-dug water well. Kind of dangerous. It's not covered in any way. Water is about, could be 10 feet down. This is the pumping chamber and pipe for a hand pump that must have been in there, pulled out for some reason. We'll get a cover on this, but if you wanted to have a garden, you'd need to have some water for dry years. I think they built this well in order to service that garden. Pumping water by hand in buckets and carrying it over. People were used to working a lot harder back then than we are now, but isn't this interesting? I did notice too that it's just barely big enough to dig in, because with these hand dug wells, you got to dig your way down. So someone had to be down there digging out, and I don't think it could possibly be any smaller than it is now and still work, but an interesting little finding, something the kids didn't know when they were choosing this property, but I'll show you more about this later as we develop this over the months and years, and also show you how that garden grows. One of the reasons I think it may be, this whole area actually may be more fertile than the surrounding areas is because, and I haven't seen it in the spring yet, but judging by the lay of the land, I think there's probably quite a little spring runoff here, bringing nutrients as it goes. It doesn't seem particularly wet, but we'll get a melt of snow with some rain. We probably get some nutrients washing in here. Probably has been happening for zillions of years. Maybe that's why it's so growthy out there. Also, it's quite sheltered. None of the plants are going to get bothered by wind or extremes like that. So, an interesting little spot and an interesting little corner of the world.